A few weeks ago we did the unboxing of the new Heroquest, and today we'll be presenting to you our review of the board game, the 3 things we liked and disliked, and an overview of the game. Hi, my name is Nick and we are Tabletop Duo. So if you're a fan of the old Heroquest board game or you're just curious about how this remake works, you've come to the right place. So let's start with our game overview, which today I will do in a different format, so please let me know what you guys think. Alright, so here we have the board. And when you start the game, you have to decide who is going to be the Dungeon Master. So the Dungeon Master starts with this shield. So the player who is the Dungeon Master is going to be using this. You also be using this book, which contains all the quests for the game. At the top part, you have the map, which contains the instructions for where you should be putting the props, the enemies, where you have traps and so on. And also some notes which if you go into certain rooms, then when players search the room or do certain actions, you have specific instructions for things that will happen. So the player who is playing as the Dungeon Master will be keeping this as a secret. The Dungeon Master also have this deck of dread spells, and these ones you can use 1 per combat if you want, and some enemies, particularly according to the quest you're playing, they might also require you to be using one of those cards. The cards, they usually make things a little bit harder for the heroes, so I'm trying to focus here so you can see. For example, this one will summon orcs to the combat, and you do that by using the red dice, which you have basically 2. That's the setup for the Dungeon Master. And then the other players, they will be playing with the heroes. You have 4 heroes, but if you're playing with less than 5 players, right, 1 Dungeon Master plus 4 players, if you have just another player, then he or she needs to play with the other 4 heroes. Otherwise the game becomes very difficult to play. And then if you have 2 players to play as heroes, then you can split 2 and 2 and so on. You have the elf, the barbarian, the dwarf and the wizard. The elf and the wizard can also cast spells, and whoever gets those characters, you have 4 types of spells regarding the elements. So you have earth, water, fire and air. So the way this works is the wizard is going to take 3 of those elements and the elf is going to take 1 of those elements. So you get all the cards for the element that you chose. And the cards, they will essentially allow your characters to either heal or perform certain things. And for that, you will usually use the red dice as well. So these red dices, they are kept with the heroes. And the heroes also get 3 dice, which they will be using for damage and for defense. And the Dungeon Master will get the other 3 dice so that he can do the rolls for the monsters. When you're ready to start, you also give to the players the character sheets. Then when you're ready to start, the Game Master will be using the schematics to build the first room, and the first room is the one where the characters will start, and you will add them to the stairs, which is the starting point. In this room, as you can see, you have a door that's locked, and you also have a prop. The Dungeon Master is not going to be adding anything to the rest of the board until the players explore, so until they open that door, you don't see what's ahead of it. The way the game works is that the 4 players will be playing their turns, and then it's time for the Dungeon Master to play. Each one of the heroes can perform a movement and an action in any order they want, so it could be action first and then movement. And then for movement, they will roll the 2 red dice, and then I can move these 11 spaces with my character. You can move only horizontally and never diagonally. And the same thing for attacks, unless you get a card later on, which I will explain how the treasures work. Then in some cases, they allow you to attack or do some actions diagonally. When you get close to the door, you can open it. So you can remove the closed door by an open door. And then the next step is that the dungeon master will fill whatever comes right after the door with the props and or enemies that you find. So here, for example, I already added some cardboard for the edges of the map, because each quest will use a certain part of the board, and then you will fill the space with the props and monsters. So here, for example, in my layout, I have a goblin here. Let's say my character like was here. So you're gonna have the goblin, you're gonna have another goblin right here, and then here I have a door, and then here I have another door, and then here I have another goblin. See? So now the players can explore these other options, and like I mentioned, even if some enemies just appeared, you will still keep playing with the other heroes, and when all the heroes' turns have passed, then it's time for Zargon or the Dungeon Master to play, and then the 4 heroes play again, and so on. Like I mentioned before, attacks need to be on a horizontal line most of the times, and the range will depend on the weapons or the spells that you're casting. Spells in the game, the way they work is that you can, when you cast a spell, it's gone for this match. So now that we talked about movement, in terms of actions you can do, you can either attack, like I explained, you can go close to the target and then attack, and you can also cast a spell, or you can search for a treasure in the room, or you can search for secret doors, traps, and disarm a trap. So you can do any one of these actions. So for example, this character could move, let's say it reached here, so it could attack. The barbarian could just move and say, I want to search the room. And this character could go and try to open a door, so you're free to do whatever you want. Once all heroes attacked, it's time for the Dungeon Master, so you're going to be playing for each one of the monsters you have on the board. And you have their cards, so you can place next to the players so they can see the stats of the monster, because you have them on your shield here. And then you will be performing for each one of them. The movement for the enemies is marked on the card, so you don't have to roll the red dice. You just move the number of up to the number of movement squares you have here on the board, and then you attack with the dice you have available, and then heroes will defend with their dice. So if you have a shield, you block. Otherwise, if it's a skull or this other symbol, you get hit. For enemies, when heroes attack, then the monsters, they defend with this face of the dice. So it's harder for them to actually block damage, but you have to use these dice that you see here. And then as you explore, depending on the mission, every time you search the room, if there is not a custom treasure you should be getting based on this booklet, then you're gonna be drawing treasure cards, and these treasure cards can give you things like, for example, a potion of healing. And then some missions will also give you artifacts, which are usually more powerful, and you want to be getting them as you play. And then as you're playing, you are also going to be finding gold, which you can then, at the end of a quest, you can spend on equipment cards, and then each one of them costs a certain amount of gold. Usually they're very expensive in the beginning of the game, but later on you should be able to buy a bunch of them. Once you have fulfilled the objective, which is listed here, then you complete your quest and you move on to the next one, taking notes on your character sheet for like everything you have done so far. So that's it for the gameplay overview. As I mentioned before, this was one of my favorite board games when I was a kid, and the first dungeon crawl board game I've ever played. So I was really excited to try this new version. So to review it, we have to be very careful because I have those feelings from the past, and I will try to be as thorough as I can, because one of the big things you need to know is that in terms of gameplay, this feels like an old classic board game. You have to roll dice to move, the progression is very shallow, and the actions you do are dependent on the dice roll, which makes the results completely random, and the characters pretty much play the same way across the board. At the same time, it has some really cool innovations for the time that I still think they endure, like the fact you have a dungeon master that can roleplay each one of the quests, a board that's basically replayable since each quest uses a different set of rooms, the fact that the dungeon master has some agency over the quests with the dread spells, and that the heroes can do more than just fight by finding secret passages, searching for treasure rooms, and also looking for and disarming traps. The quest book comes with 12 quests, and each quest will take around an hour or two to play, so that seems a good amount of time for your board game group. Players can also do some roleplay, which adds a lot to the game, and because you're carrying your characters from quest to quest, you end up like creating a lot of anecdotes that you will be carrying over until the end of the campaign. As you go from quest to quest, the amount of gold you acquire will allow you to improve your characters, but I find that the character progression is very slow. Some items you buy, they are really cool and give a clear advantage in battle, but you also have a lot of them that don't improve your character significantly. The fact that the only way to attack enemies in diagonal spaces is by finding equipment that allows you to do so feels kind of cheap, and it's something I feel they should have improved from the mechanics of the original game. The part of the progression I like the most is when you start acquiring artifacts, and the artifacts, they really change the way you play the game, making your characters feel really powerful. But overall, I think this is a great game if you want to introduce players to the dungeon crawl board games, since the mechanics are really simple and easy to understand, and the setting is also pretty cool. You also have the Dungeon Master, which adds a lot to the board game, like I said before, and he can help the players with the rules if needed. So it would be very easy to introduce new players and make them have fun, you know, without overthinking strategies or committing to campaigns that last for months and months. Also, I have to mention that the production value of the props is huge because they look really nice on the board, and they help you a lot by creating some ambience and creating that cool feeling of discovering a new room, like full of objects, and then you search the room for treasures and all. It's really cool. So now let's go through the 3 things we liked about the game and the 3 things we didn't like. And the first thing we liked a lot is really what I just mentioned about the props. I think the new 3D props, they added a lot to the ambience of the game, and for new players it feels really good to explore a new room and then see these props being laid out and imagining how the room is going to look like. The second aspect I liked a lot is the fact that you have a Dungeon Master, because that feels very different from most dungeon crawl games nowadays, except if you play classic games like Dungeons and Dragons board games. Like I mentioned before, if you're introducing a dungeon crawl board game to new players, or if you just want to have a campaign where players are role-playing, the Dungeon Master helps creating a unique play session experience by moving the enemies basically where they want, using the dread spells, and narrating what players get when they search for rooms and when they achieve objectives. And the third thing we liked is the fact that the board game has a fixed layout, but the quest book creates different room configurations, making each quest feel like it's being played in a different location. That's helped also by the props, which will be different every time you play by the configuration of the layout. This is nothing new, and it's already done in the classic game, but I think it's worth mentioning if it's the first time you're going to be playing the game. Now let's go to the 3 things we didn't like. The first one is going to be the fact that you have this old mechanic where you have to do the dice roll to move. Do you know when you play Clue and you want to go from room to another room, and then you get 3 times in a row to move only 1 space because of the die? That's really bad, and it's what happens a lot in this game. You could be playing as a super strong barbarian and you're trying to fight an enemy, and that enemy is like 3 spaces from you, and you roll, and then you get to move only 1 or 2 spaces, and you can't actually get close to the enemy, although the enemy is super close. And this could have been something that they could update in the new version. The second thing we didn't like is the fact that the spells, they can only be used once per quest, and a lot of them are based on chance because you have to roll the dice. So spellcaster characters, they don't have a lot of ways to deal the damage, and sometimes you find yourself in situations where you're low on health, there's an enemy in front of you, you spend your spells, and then boom, they're gone. So I think they should have thought about ways to recuperate the spells during combat, so that if you play with a wizard, you would be casting spells 90% of your time, since when you choose the wizard, you expect to be using spells, right? And the third thing we didn't like is the lack of ways to mitigate that random factor of the dice rolls. So for example, maybe a character could gain a token that allowed them to re-roll a dice every time they do certain actions, or potions that you can drink which allows you to reduce or increase the dice roll result, and so on. And if you're curious about the game contents, I would also like to invite you to check our unboxing video. And if you like other dungeon crawl games, don't forget to check our review videos and how to play guides. So thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye!